Okay, everybody, I have to apologize. I don't know how it happened, but I lost my voice is on the verge of being lost. So I'll talk as long as I can. And if we have to switch to whispering, we will. I don't know what happened. I think it's all Harsh and I were talking on the phone about his house, and I got really excited and talked a lot more than I usually do. So talk is just about how I made my house a zero energy house. And, when you think about a zero energy house, you think about these things that are weird looking, that have, they look like a styrofoam box with PV panels on top, or maybe they look like some strange architect's dream. This second, is my pointer showing up here?
Yes. Yeah, you can see.
Okay, good. Or maybe something here, just like like Trump said in the last election, a house with no windows. But they really don't have to look like that. I mean, this is the, oops, let me get rid of that. This is the net zero house that they built at NIST for research purposes. They can change all the configuration and they have all kinds of instrumentation. And as you can see, it looks like, I'll say, quote, a normal house. But of course, these houses are grotesque and obscene in how large they are. But that's the culture nowadays, and sort of reminds me of this energy savings thing. I've been trying to do it ever since I was in college and this energy crisis hit. And it's more like a philosophy, no matter what situation you're in, you try to do your best to not waste resources. And that's what I've always been doing. Unfortunately, I find myself now that I'm living in a grotesquely large house, but so I'm doing the same thing, trying to make it have as small impact as possible. So I apologize ahead of time for our house. This is our house. We wanted something with trees, and so to get trees, you had to have, I don't know, bigger house or something. But they don't have to look strange. That's the purpose of this talk. I came across this great note about this guy, Larry Smarf, one of these physicist, computer scientist, internet pioneers. He's measuring 160 parameters in his body in real time. And here he is giving a TED talk about it, plotting everything up. And that really cracked me up. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just as strange. I'm measuring a bunch of parameters in my house. And here's some plots that we got out of that. But my favorite quote is this one. Deborah Estrin, who's a professor of computer science and public health at Cornell. And she runs a thing called the Small Data Lab. And her quote is, getting the data is much easier than making it useful. And anybody who's been an experimentalist knows that. Okay, so what's a zero energy house? Sort of obvious. They net meter. So after some period of time, say a year, the question is, have you produced more energy or have you used more energy for all of the needs? Heating, cooling, hot water, cooking, and electrical loads. So why make zero energy houses? Well, buildings account for 41% of total US energy consumption from all fuels and 73% of electricity. Hence, they're major contributors to greenhouse gas production in the US. Most important to me is reducing building energy use is one of the fastest, most cost-effective ways to reduce our carbon footprint. If you live in a house, you can do these things almost immediately, as fast as you can find someone to fix it, or if you're doing it yourself, do it yourself. And most of the other things require infrastructure changes that take more time, but it's really got tremendous potential to make a difference right now. Okay, so the quest to make my home low energy. A long time ago, you guys have probably heard of Ralph Nader. He was a big citizen. He was really into citizens' action and environmentalism. And he said something like, for everyone on Earth to live like Americans do, we'll probably need 3 more planet Earths. We're probably not going to get them. That's a pretty daunting thought. And so I'm trying to do my small part to stop trashing the Earth, which we are doing in this country. There's no question about it. But also have fun. To me, this is a really neat challenge. And also to learn something. I mean, it's really, to me, it's really exciting. Every day I wake up and practically everything I do, when I take the plastic top off the orange juice container, I say to myself, where is this thing going? I mean, the question is, how can we do better than we are? And the good news is that we have tremendous potential because we're so far in the wrong direction. And if we just start making progress, we'll get there. It's sort of like climbing a mountain. You know, you guys have probably all hiked and you look off in the distance and you look at the spot way off in the distance and you say to yourself, man, I can't imagine ever getting there. But you take one step at a time and before you know it, you're there. And to me, energy efficiency, lowering our carbon footprint is the same thing. We just start doing it step at a time and we'll make really good progress. Oops. Okay, one thing I should mention is I've done a bad thing. I've plagiarized a lot of figures. About half of the figures are things I've taken off the web. You'll probably notice all the snazzy looking things are things I lifted. Anything that looks like, you know, a homework assignment from a high school, those are probably things I did. But, you know, these people are people like Efficiency Vermont or the Department of Energy or other agencies that want the information out. So they're probably okay. Sometimes I've tried to note it, but usually I don't. So this picture shows you the sort of things you might attack in a house or look at in making energy efficiency. LED lights are simple. They're practically free. They have so much utility subsidy from my utility that they're practically free. So that would be the very first thing you'd want to do. You know, increasing the insulation is always a good thing wherever you can. Energy management, these smart thermostats, I don't think they do anything. I think they're sort of stupid. I mean, I think that there's a lot of hype behind them, but basically if you design your house properly, you don't need a smart thermostat. I don't really see what you get out of it, but I guess there are probably some circumstances where it can help. If you did some zoning, that might help a little bit. Heat pumps are great. We'll talk more about that later. Heat pump water heater is a great thing. Also very good. It also has the added benefit of dehumidifying your basement, which typically has high humidity and needs to be dehumidified. When you make houses tighter, when you cut down on the air leaks, sometimes you need ventilation, mechanical ventilation for the house. And if you do some heat exchange in that ventilator, you can save some energy there. And better appliances are a really great thing to do. Front load washers, for example, are so much better than the top loaders. Air sealing, doors, leaks, windows. We'll talk more about that. Windows is listed here. Very good thing. Another really, really easy thing to do is put a good quality, effective, low flow water fixtures. A lot of them are low flow already, but that's a great thing you can do. Of course, there's lifestyle changes. I won't talk about that. A typical sort of thing that we've done, you know, we keep our house at 80 degrees in the summer. I actually don't like coming into a house that's too cold. I work outside a lot and I think it's uncomfortable and you know, it's perfectly fine to be at 80 degrees. Why we overcool our buildings, I don't know. Okay, so this is really daunting, but it shouldn't be. This is everything I did to my house to make it zero energy. But as we walk through it, I think you'll see it's not that overwhelming. It's color coded. Things like let's see, the red are normal maintenance things. So when you do a normal maintenance thing, a good thing to do, what I always did was think about, okay, it's an opportunity to upgrade, to make things more energy efficient. The windows were a good example. They were really dangerous. You know, they were old double hung wooden windows. And if you weren't careful, they'd come slamming down and break your arm. They were, you know, 30 years old and terrible, poor quality to start with. My wife really wanted them replaced. And they needed to be replaced, and doing so with more efficient windows really helped a lot. I wish I had gone to triple pane. I only put double pane in. I wish I had gone to triple pane, but live and learn. So a lot of these things are things that just wear out naturally, and you have to replace them. Sealing the ducts, exterior doors, storm doors, weather stripping, is not on here. I guess it is. Door weather stripping, attic ventilation. You know, we had our roof replaced and the guy wasn't going to put any ventilation in. The contractor and I argued and argued, and finally he put some. Basement windows were terrible, terrible things, and we replaced those. The basement sliding glass door was freezing cold and leaky, and so you could barely even use the basement. So it had to be replaced just to make it livable, and so we put a much more efficient door in. The kitchen needed to be upgraded. It was, 30 years old and obsolete and falling apart. When I did that, I put a good kitchen vent fan, because you want good ventilation in the kitchen if your house is tighter. And then I insulated the walls better, things like that. So that's the first category. The second is equipment. The refrigerators wear out, or the dishwasher wears out, or the computers wear out, and you've got to replace them. If you buy higher efficiency, you're going to be better off in the long run. It costs more up front, but it saves money and energy over the long run. The third category is, insulation, just insulating more things. I'll talk more about that. The fourth category is strange, unplanned leaks that waste a lot of energy. Houses are just built in a very haphazard, shoddy sort of way, and they don't think about the energy flows. And if you go back and examine them, you can find all kinds of opportunities to save energy. I'll talk a fair amount about that. The third category is fun. It's just really fun. And so I put things in, every time I'd upgrade equipment, I'd add data acquisition systems so I could understand what was going on. The utility has pretty good metering. We can actually get hourly data. I pretty much just use the monthly bills, but you can learn all kinds of things if you're willing to look at the data that's supplied already by the utility. Along those lines, I put this thing called the energy detective. It's one of these things that monitors the energy in the house. Kilowatt is a little plug-in meter. I had them come out and give me an instrumented energy audit. I got a data acquisition system for the ground source heat pump, and the PV solar array also has a data acquisition system. So sometimes I had to spend more money, but it was worth every dollar of it because it's so much fun. And the other fun category is the electric car. We got an electric car. I'll talk more about that. I'll talk about this actually when I show the picture. The first is I had these guys come out, and the utility for $100 will give you an instrumented energy audit. And they give you this report, which doesn't mean too much. But they did tell me that I needed to insulate things, and then we're taxed. My utility basically taxes us, and then they give us the money back as rebates on things like LED light bulbs and insulation. So if you have this energy audit, then you get a 50% savings on insulation. So that was very helpful. They also do this thing called the blower door test. They put this fan in the doorway, and they measure the airflow through the fan as a function of pressure. And from that leakage rate at 50 pascals, they tell you what your implied ventilation rate is for your house under natural ventilation conditions. And for my house, it turned out to be about 3.5 air changes an hour at 50 pascals, which said we had about 75 CFM of airflow, cubic feet per minute, which means we need some mechanical ventilation. So we put upgraded bath fans in, basically. A fun thing for me is that when I was at Princeton back in the early or the late 70s, two of my colleagues here were really pioneers in this. They invented the blower door, and they were the first to combine infrared cameras with the blower door to find the air leaks, because when the air leaks, it cools or heats the surfaces of the wall. And so you can actually see the leaks because they cool the surfaces that they're going through. And this is actually an article from National Geographic magazine. They had a feature article about the research that these guys were doing at that time. Very, very exciting. Kilowatt, you plug it in, it tells you either the instantaneous power use or the integrated power use over time. And we learned really useful things like the dehumidifier uses about 5 kilowatt hours a day to actually this would be more like 10. Now I'm down to about 5 kilowatt hours a day. That turns out to be about 2 megawatt hours a year. These numbers don't make sense to you yet, but I'll show you a pie chart. You can put it on the refrigerators and see that they draw like an average of 50 watts. PCs in standby draw about 20 watts. When you're using them, that can go up to a lot more. The old PCs used a lot more. The entertainment center, the thing that sits, the set-top box, used like 26 watts in standby. So about half of a refrigerator. So I got rid of that and just went to internet television service. But these things are really great for getting a sense of what's going on. We put this thing down here, the energy detective, it plugs into the outlet, and then through power line communication, it communicates with these current transducers that go. We have one, you can't see it, unfortunately, it's cropped off, but I had one on the entire power coming into the house. So I got the whole house. And then you can sub-meter different appliances or different circuits. And that was really, really helpful for understanding what was going on. For example, this is the whole house energy use. This is the average daily use in kilowatt hours versus the day for about, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. And you can see I have big chunks of missing data. I have other things, this is just a hobby for me. And unfortunately, the thing flakes out sometimes and I lost some data, but I calibrated it. It's pretty accurate when it hasn't lost its communication. Look at the average. You can see really cool things. The high peaks are in the summer, then it goes down in the spring and fall, then it goes, this is a good example. So this is fall, that's winter, that's spring, that's winter. You can see the seasonal variation. Look at the average. The average is about 40 or 50 kilowatt hours a day. That's an important number to think about as we look at the solar array output. We'll come back to that. Here's a sub-metered panel on our, I'm sorry to say, swimming pool pumps, and not a heater, just the pumps and filters and the cleaner, and also DHWs, domestic hot water. So here we can see the swimming pool. This is summertime, and that's the summertime, the sum of the hot water and the swimming pool use. But this is really cool here. You can see in the wintertime, it's really high. There's no swimming pool pump use, but it's really high in the winter because the water, even though it's coming through the ground, it's cold in the winter, and probably the kids are taking more showers. I have 2 teenagers. And then it goes down so that in the summer, it's a lot less. So you can learn all kinds of really cool things. So these are the sort of things we learned from that. Hot water varies between 3 and 13 kilowatt hours a day. When the heat pump water heater is working, it's like 3. If it's electric resistive, it's like 13. The pool pumps use about 7 kilowatt hours a day. The clothes dryer uses about 3.5 kilowatt hours a day per load. We do about a load a day. The dishwasher uses 2.6 kilowatt hours per load, and we do maybe a load. We're up to probably a load a day almost now. And the normal setting are about the same. The quick setting is about 25% savings. The zombie load, just having this thing turned on when it's not being used, would use about 35% of the total. So we press the button and turn it off in between loads. Interestingly, water heating is only about 9% of the total use. I think pumping losses are big, but it also heats the water a little bit more to get a higher temperature. So it's just really fun getting in the ballpark and finding out what's important to work on. I should mention that the dishwasher is a really good high efficiency Bosch unit. Others would be more wasteful. You can do simple calculations. So I'm sort of showing you the tools at our disposal to figure out what's going on so we know what to do. Showers, 2.5, you put a bucket under it, you measure the flow, figure people usually take about 8 minutes a shower, except that's the kids, after I've yelled at them long enough, they usually get out after that point. That's 20 gallons per shower. You can figure it out. That's about 2.5 kilowatt hours of raw energy that we need in the water. If we use a heat pump water heater, that comes out to about it's got a coefficient of performance of about a 3. So getting 3 kilowatt hours of hot water requires about a kilowatt hour per shower. 4 showers a day, that means 4 kilowatt hours a day, something like that. The utility meter, we get a lot of useful data out of that. I won't talk about it. Oh, except for this. This is our monthly utility bill plotted up for 10 or like 14 or 15 years. So you can see again, this is the, let's see, we'll pick one here. This is the summer use. Then this is the spring. It goes down way down. And I'm sorry, this is winter use. Spring, summer, fall, and then same thing over and over again. What happened here? Well, I was putting a new deck on the a new surface on the deck, and we bumped into, I didn't know it, I only learned after I looked at my utility bill that month, that we bumped into the emergency disconnect switch for the heat pump, which was right under the deck. That turned the compressor off. So the heat pump system went into resistive emergency backup. So we lost about a factor of 2 in the efficiency of our heating system for almost a good part of the winter. But, plugged it in there, got it working again, and everything was okay. You can see the downward average is going down. And that's because over this 15-year period, I was constantly making improvements to the house to upgrade things. All those things that I listed on that other thing, we did over this time period, just slowly, one thing at a time as it came up. It's a lot better to do these things like as soon as you buy the house is empty. It's really easy. You're in the mood, but I didn't have the money or time, or I didn't know. I don't know. I didn't do that. So you can also plot it up with the average monthly bill versus the outdoor temperature. And I converted into average kilowatts for that month. So the slope represents the combination of the thermal efficiency of your building and the thermal efficiency of your heating system. And this is the summer that we're on electric resistive heat. So you can see how that changed tremendously, the slope. If we shift these curves down, that's because we've changed the base load, things like the lighting or the television use or stuff like that, things that's sort of always there and is independent of the outside temperature. The weather dependent load is primarily heating and cooling, and also hot water to some extent. So as you can see, the numbers are the year. So 2002, 2003 would be this purple one. That's when we moved in. And 14, 15 would be the last one. So generally things moved down. Slope didn't change that much, surprisingly. But I should say in the fall of 2015 is when we put the ground source heat pump in, and that would change this slope by a factor of 2 roughly. Okay, so you can learn really cool things from this. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the more mundane things. Ducts. This is a duct. Often they're disconnected, which is not very efficient. They just fall apart. People use duct tape on them. Duct tape, believe it or not, is not supposed to be used on ducts. You can see this had duct tape. It deteriorates over time, and then the duct falls apart. You should use that metal foil back stuff, which is really good and lasts a lot longer. Let me switch to a laser pointer. That might be more fun. Okay, here's another picture. This is something I stole from the web. This is ductwork in the attic. Very, very bad thing to do. Your house is heated to like 70 degrees in the winter, but the air coming through the ducts is probably heated to 80 or 100, depending upon what type of system you have. You have maybe 6 inches or 2 feet of insulation in your attic, but look, your ductwork only has 1 inch of insulation. Why is that? The delta T is higher in the ductwork, and ducts tend to be leaky. It's just a terrible thing, and it should be against the law, but it's not, unfortunately, or at least the codes for how much insulation you have should require more insulation on the ductwork than between in the building and the attic. For example, this is a register in our dining room. You can see the registers, everything's fine. But if you go down into the basement, I took away the panels because I guess, I don't know, I was just following the ducts when I moved in to see where everything was going. And you can see there's nothing hooked up to it. This is very, very typical. Houses just have these crazy things that waste a lot of energy. And if you fix them right off the bat, you get a lot of savings. And I should say that my the first summer or winter's worth of data, I actually fixed a lot of these really obvious things like this. Okay, so now we're going to talk about thermal bypasses. Gautam Dutt, who actually was a rocket scientist, believe it or not, he got his PhD at Princeton working on electric propulsion, which is when they accelerate ions through a high voltage nozzle in a rocket ship for space travel of the future. The specific impulse is way higher for electric propulsion than for chemical rockets. And he did that. And he got out and he really believed in energy efficiency, and he switched and completely switched careers and started working on that. And so he was studying buildings. This is one of the first infrared cameras available. It was handheld. Most of the others were on carts. And you can actually see the leaks. So you can see conductive losses, but you can also see air leaks. And what Gautam discovered was that the attics were way warmer in the wintertime than they should have been based on the amount of insulation. And what he found was there were these places where the heat was bypassing the insulation. And he called them bypass heat leaks. And the first thing you do before you put insulation is fix the bypasses, because A, they're very important, and B, if your attic is the same temperature as your house, then the insulation is not doing anything. And C, the air carries moisture. And when the moisture comes into a cold attic, it condenses on the surfaces and drips and causes moisture problems. So you've got to seal up those leaks. So that's the first thing that anybody should do if they want to make their house energy efficient, is find these strange leaks and fix them. Here are some examples. Here's a stack from a gas furnace with a hole much bigger. You can't see this when the insulation's over it, but the hole is there and all the air leak comes up. This one's a little better. It's a chimney for a gas furnace, but again, air leaks around it. Even the top plate on a wall. So this is the view of a wall from the top. You can see the electrical wires coming out and there's leaks there. But even the cracks here, if the 2x4 studs are off center a little bit as they go down, then the sheetrock can't go tight against this top plate, and you get this long crack of air. Here's a view of it. The air can come up through that space between the stud and the drywall. And if you peel back the insulation and fix this stuff, it really makes a big difference. It's miserable work and it's horrible, but some people do it. I did it because it's important. Around chimneys, you usually have air leaks. It's good to fix them. Let me get a drink of something to save my voice. If you have ducts in the attic, you also have air leaks around them that the air can go through. Again, the plumbing pipes. So this is just a schematic of the same thing. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is where they were in my house. And it was absolutely unbelievable. I'm going to skip down. On my house, between the floors, there are these things called truss joists. In the olden days, they used to use solid 2x10s or something like that. Nowadays, they take a joist and they make it out of 2x4s. And this is the space between the top and the second floor. So between the first floor and the second floor, there all through the house, there are these truss joists. And I went up into my attic and I looked, and they didn't put any plywood. Usually all this stuff is covered with plywood. So the fact that it's a truss doesn't matter on the outside of the house. So the outside of the house here is all covered with plywood underneath the siding. And so you'd never see the truss, even if you took off the siding. But in my house, when I went up into the attic of the garage, you could stand right here and there was no plywood. The building said, oh, we don't need plywood because it's in the garage. And the garage is part of the house protected from the outside. So we didn't need plywood. So you could bend down and peer through that truss space and look through the entire house, because there's one truss after another, after another, after another. And so you could look at the entire length of the house into the middle of the house, which connects thermally with everything, because you've got a huge surface area on the floor and ceiling where it can conduct, not to mention all the penetrations that we just talked about that would carry air into there. So the first thing I did was go into my attic and stuff insulation in that space. Here's the left side and here's the right side. Sorry, I didn't have a great picture. This is the space right here in the attic, basically. And then after that, I put plastic on it. And after that, I put plywood. So, you'd think that that would probably save a lot of energy, but I think before I did anything, I was probably about a factor of 2 better than my neighbors' houses because they didn't fix these leaks. I'll talk more about others. Okay, so here's this one. I showed you that picture. Here's another one. This is the kitchen, and above that is the bedroom. Okay, so here's the kitchen. Here's a bedroom. This thing called the knee wall attic right here. So it looks something like this. This is the knee wall attic. This is the bedroom and this is the kitchen, something like this. So you've got a living space, you've got the heated space down here, and this is called the knee wall attic. And what happens is heat leaks. It goes into this dead space because of those trusses, and it conducts and it goes into here and it goes into here. And so this, which should be a cold space, is actually losing all kinds of heat. Now, the proper way to do it is insulate it like this. But in my house, it was insulated like this. They insulated right here, but they did not insulate here. And they had ventilation from the outside, from here, into here, into here, into the attic, which you want, and then into this space. So all this stuff was ventilated through louvers. The entire house was ventilated all into this space in the middle of the house, which doesn't make any sense. So what I did was put insulation. It was actually continuous from here all the way up to here. And I kept a vent space. So this ventilation would go up, cool the shingles, and ventilate any moisture and go up into the attic and provide an outlet for the attic space. But this crazy stuff happens in houses all the time. And some contractors know about it. I've found a few people that know about it, but a lot don't. And fixing these things is very, very helpful. Insulation. After fixing the bypasses in the attic, we put like 18 inches of insulation. When we had new siding put on, we had this aluminum siding that was all damaged from hail. We had them put 3/8 of an inch of insulation. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. If I had to do it again, I figured out a way. If you use screws instead of nails for the siding, then you can put an inch of styrofoam, and that would have been even better. And I taped the joints so we wouldn't have air leaks. Oh, this space between the basement and the first floor, usually there's a plate that goes around. I forget what it's called, and it's uninsulated. And spraying foam on that really helps a lot. The basement walls were mostly uninsulated in my house. So I figured, okay, I sprayed some insulation in, or had the contractor do it, into this stud space. And then we put drywall over it, and that helped a lot. This is the before, this is the after. The cool thing is that in doing this, I put some nice windows in the basement because it was ground floor basement. And so afterwards, a lot of times when you make energy efficiency upgrades, the house does not become worse, it becomes better. And that's happened with everything I did to the house to make it energy efficient. So, when done properly, these things make the house much nicer, much more comfortable. This is my friend Dietmar, also a rocket scientist, and our idea of fun is to work together. And so when he came out to visit, we insulated my garage walls, which probably didn't need to be done, but a warm garage is nice. We didn't heat it. We just cut down on the heat losses. And now that I have my electric car, it's really good to keep the battery warm, so I don't have to heat the car up with battery juice when I go for a drive, or heat the car up with the battery juice. This picture, same picture as before, it's just showing that with a chimney, fireplaces are terrible. They create a stack effect. A tremendous flow goes up them. Even when they're closed, they leak a lot. You have a lot of conduction losses. So we got rid of the fire. Even with a metal window screen is very good. It helps. We put a heat exchanger in the first few winters, but eventually we put a wood burning stove in, and that helped a lot. And all the data I'll show you here, we didn't burn the wood burning stove, so the data are not polluted by external energy uses. Okay, heat pumps. I probably don't have to explain this to you guys, but the last class I gave, they didn't necessarily know what heat pumps were. Basic idea. This is in cooling mode. You take a fluid like a Freon, you evaporate it in the condenser. So you have it under high pressure here, goes through a pinhole, it comes out, and when it comes out, it goes to a low pressure and it evaporates. When it evaporates, it cools down because it needs energy. You blow air by that and you get the cool air and you use it. And then, I'm sorry, the expansion valve is on this side. Then it must be on this side. Maybe anyway, then you what is this? Oh, I'm saying it wrong. I'm sorry. I was calling the condenser the evaporator. I'm sorry. The evaporator is over here. It's because my picture was here and it threw me off. But the evaporator evaporates. You get cold air out of it. Expansion valve is here. And then you have a compressor. You compress it and that heats the fluid back up. You send it through the condenser and the condenser, the fluid is hot and you blow air by it and you get the heat out. So depending upon whether you need the hot or cold depends upon how which side you take it from, or you can actually reverse the flow in a heat pump. But basically it's a way of moving heat from one place to another using compressed and evaporating fluids, two-phase fluids. And you get it, the coefficient of performance is really good. It varies between 2 and 5, depending upon what type of system you have. That means you get between 2 and 5 times as much energy out as mechanical energy you put in, which is really great. Heat pump water heater saves about a factor of 3. It really was, and I sub-metered it, so I knew how energy efficient it was. It's about 3 times more efficient. This one eventually wore out, and I got another one, which is 4 times as efficient as electric resistance. So one of the first things you can do, my utility gives you about $700 rebate, so that makes this cost about the same as an electric resistive water heater. Which of course is a thermodynamic sin because it's using high quality electricity to make very low temperature thermal energy in the hot water. As I mentioned, this thing puts out cold air, which is great in the summertime because it dehumidifies and cools the basement, which we dehumidify it anyway with a dehumidifier. So this is a double savings. Conventional heat pump, my old heat pump had a coefficient of performance of about a factor of coefficient of COP of about 2. But at some point we went to a ground source heat pump. That's better because, in the wintertime it's cold outside and you're trying to use the cold for your heat source. And you guys probably remember the Carnot efficiency goes down a lot if your temperature source of your heat pump goes down. So by using the ground temperature as your thermal reservoir, it's about 55 degrees year round, roughly. And so it's better than the cold air in the wintertime, which can be between 0 and 35 degrees Fahrenheit. So it makes the heat pump much more efficient. So typically, one way of doing it is you put vertical loops of tubing into the ground, or you can put them horizontally, but I don't like the horizontal ones. I don't think they're deep enough. And then you run a freeze ethanol water mixture through the loops, and you use that as your heat transfer medium. I actually paid a little extra and got a data acquisition system, which is really cool because it tells me everything that's going on. I'd love to study this thing and figure out how well it's working, but I haven't had time. I use it from time to time for small things. This is, you get, every data every 10 seconds for 15 years now. No, 5 years, I'm sorry. Here they are drilling in my yard. After they've drilled the hole, here they are putting the heat exchange tubes into the hole. We have 2 holes, each about 285 feet deep. So this is the daily energy use for the ground source heat pump. And this is the thing is unbelievable. Now, granted, our house is pretty well insulated and very tight. And, we keep the temperatures at reasonable amounts, 68 in the winter and 80 in the summer. But still, the coldest day of the year, we use 25 kilowatt hours. That's about $4 to heat our house during the coldest day of the year. In the summer, the coldest day of the year costs us about $1. Or is that two, maybe $1.50, something like that. It's just absolutely amazing. On average, 10 kilowatt hours, it's really, really efficient. It's about coefficient of performance of about 5. So here is what happened when we added the ground source heat pump. This is when we put it in, and you can see these peaks of the winter are completely chopped off. The summer peaks go down a little bit, but it's a little hard to tell. I mean, there's a lot of, the problem with this stuff is that there's a lot going on. We have kids, they're growing up, they're using energy differently, things break. And then when they break, they're not as efficient. And it sometimes takes me time to figure it out, but it was working the way it was supposed to. So where do we stand after all these efficiency upgrades, but before the solar? So here's our pie chart. So after I moved in and I fixed the bypasses, we're using about 17 megawatt hours a year. And this is in the, what is this? Yeah. So this is 14. Okay, I'm sorry. This is after I did everything except put the ground source heat pump in. Okay, so this is after everything, 17 megawatt hours a year. And this is where it was going. Heating and cooling was almost half. Hot water was about 20%. Dehumidification of the basement was quite a bit. Our 3 fridges used a significant amount. The dryer, the pool pumps, dishwashing, computers, lighting. So that's where it all went. Now, when we went to ground source heat pump, we saved quite a bit here. We went from 17 down to 15. So we saved 2 megawatt hours a year. But probably the house was more comfortable because the thing, it's unbelievable how efficient things are. To run the electric fan used to be an expensive thing in the old heating system, but now they have these new type of ECM, electronically commutated motors. You can run the circulation fan for the entire year, and it costs $50 worth of electricity. The electric bill here was about $2,500 a year for starters. So by running the fan the year round, all the time, the temperatures are much more uniform in the house. The house is a lot more comfortable. Now, look, why is hot water, so the pie is smaller. Why is hot water so big? Well, I discovered after the fact that my really efficient heat pump water heater, after about 10 years, stopped working. So I was back to electric resistive heat. So I'm losing a factor of 3. This should really be about 3 times smaller here or something like that. I don't know exactly because I don't know when it broke. But the important point here is that heating and cooling are a significantly smaller fraction of the total, and dehumidification is now a pretty big fraction. Okay, solar energy changes everything. It's absolutely unbelievable what has happened. This is the price of silicon, the manufacturing cost of silicon photovoltaic cells in dollars per watt. So this is when I was halfway through college, $77 a watt. Now, I don't know what it is now, but in 2015, it was 33 cents. I estimated it was 22 cents. I don't know where I got that estimate from. At that point, it was a 350 times decrease in price. That is why photovoltaics are now the largest new generating capacity in this country from any source. The largest fraction is from solar, followed by wind, followed by natural gas. So it's really, really economical now to put PV in. Why is that? This is really cool. This guy Swanson founded this company called Sun Power. They make the best US. They're really good, high efficiency solar panels, and they're really efficient. And I'm sorry, I had to check my time. I got to pick my daughter up at some point. And he said, "Hey, look, Just like that guy with the chips, Moore's law. He said there's the Swanson's law, which is if you double PV production, the price drops by 20%. That's why the price has come down. And this is not a new idea. This guy, Theodore Wright, in 1936, studied the cost of airplane production and found the same thing, that there's this learning curve. As you do it, you get better at it. You learn how to do it more cheaply. I mean, look at this airplane in 1936. This is the DC-3, which was the state of the art at the time. It was a fantastic airplane. Collectors love them. It was unbelievable. It could go across the country with only stopping 3 times, and it could make it in only 18 hours of flying time. Had a cruise speed of 200 miles per hour. And it was just absolutely fantastic. And think about what we do now with our jet aircraft. It's the efficiency of airplanes has gone up tremendously, and the comfort and the speed and all that. If we do things, we get better at it, and we can do these hard things. Anyway, so this is my house. Don't look at the upper right-hand corner. That's the swimming pool. It came with the swimming pool. I didn't put it in. I didn't want it, but that's the way it goes. So here's the PV arrays. And we did this, and we don't even have a south-facing roof. South is the bottom of this screen. We have nothing that faces south. These pitches are all southeast or southwest, which, I lose about 20 or 30% because they don't face south. But, that's the way it goes. So the output, the efficiency, the payback would all be 20 or 30% better if we had a decent roof. This is the inverter in the basement. Nothing to look at here. It converts the DC power from the panels into AC power. The only thing I'll say here is that, I wish I could have bought storage. They don't have storage yet. The utility is great. We have good laws in Maryland. They basically add up how much energy I've drawn from the grid and how much I've put back when I'm overproducing. And then they settle up at the end of the year, and they send me a check if I've used too much energy, or I pay them. If I've made extra energy, they send me a check, and if I've used energy, I send them a check. It's really cool because it has individual panel performance. So I know panel by panel how well they're working. And if something breaks, I can have it fixed. This is the daily solar production. The dotted line is like a 7-day running average or something. And again, it goes up in the summertime, opposite to the load. The production goes up in the summertime, goes down in the wintertime. The cool thing here, look, remember our average load for the whole house was 40 or 50 kilowatt hours. But look, that's right about where the average is for the production. This is just the average monthly use for the 5 or 6 years we've had it at this point. The different colors of the different years. So you can see the monthly production is not that different from year to year. Although look, in the red one, 2019, the inverter stopped working for this month and this month. And so we lost a lot of power, like 20% of our total for that year. That was a bummer. And I didn't notice it fast enough. It'd be a great student project just to write software to download from the company, how to, how the panels are working, and then send you an email if something stops working. Because otherwise you don't know. It doesn't give you any feedback. And this would be really cool to do. But there's all kinds of stuff like that to do. Okay, results. So I showed you this plot already. We put the ground source heat pump in. We shaved off these peaks. This is with the PV. So this is load. This is how much energy we need for the house. This is what we're buying from the utility. So you can see the PV puts us over the edge and gets us into zero energy. And if we put the rest of it on, we can see that the 0 point is right about here. So that's great. You might ask yourself, could we have done this without making the house more energy efficient? I don't know. My house is probably a factor of 3 more efficient than a regular house. So did we have 3 times the area? Maybe not. did we have, but there were more places we could have put PV, and PV panels are significantly, they're about 30% more efficient now than they were when I bought mine for a similar price. So you know, it might have been possible. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. But generally, you want to make your house energy efficient before you put the PV panels on. The other good thing is that we actually were making more than we were using. So here's before the PV. Like I mentioned, 17 megawatt hours a year, no PV. So net use was from the utility was 17 megawatts. Here's the 3 years after that. First year was 13 megawatts, then it went to 15, then 15. I think this is because the heat pump water heater stopped working. But the PV production was just about 17 megawatts. So if you look, we've got extra. The first year we had 3 megawatts extra. Second year we had 2 megawatts extra. The third we had only 1. It didn't look like a good trend, but so basically on average we have 2 extra megawatt hours a year. That means I can buy a plug-in hybrid and get 10,000 miles of electric solar powered electric car per year, which is what we did. We bought a plug-in Prius. I didn't think I was going to love it, but I absolutely love it. Once you've gone to electric drive, you'll never go back to combustion engine again. My friend Dietmar, who's German, of course, he loves cars. Used to have all these fancy cars, and he's got an electric Volkswagen now, and he says he'll never go back. So for the first 2 years, so this thing has a gasoline motor too. For the first 2 years I used it, 80% of my miles were electric, and it just plugs into a 110 volt outlet. So it's super convenient. And it's also, according to Consumer Reports, the cheapest car in total costs, you know, first cost, fuel cost, maintenance cost. It's the cheapest car there is on the road. And 80% of the miles can be electric. So that's really cool. Okay, where are we? Costs. Insulation, not so much, but it's labor intensive. By fixing these bypass heat leaks doesn't cost so much, but again, labor intensive. I did these things myself. If you paid somebody, it would cost money, but you know, the utility will give you a rebate. Appliances, more efficient versions cost more, but they're always cheaper in the long run. Ground source heat pump, lots of government rebates made it cost only about $3,000 more than conventional high efficiency heat pump. So for me, that was worth it. I got another factor of 2 of efficiency. I haven't gone through the economics of it. For me, it was worth it. Without the subsidies, I don't know. A lot of this stuff is you know, your state of mind. You know, the price of houses nowadays, these things are small fractions of the total cost. The PV system, it's about the price of a new car. Either a small new car like my Prius or a big honking SUV. If you put a lot of, you know, the top of the line panels that were more efficient and higher quality and more of them. But basically, it's less expensive than buying the power from the utility company. Mine will pay themselves off in 5 or 10 years, depending upon whether you use certain tax credits or not. With the savings, okay, but after the 5 or 10 years, the panels should last 30 years. In fact, they're warranted for 25. So that means you get 20 or 25 years of free electricity for the entire house and for our electric car. So what's the value of that? To me, it's tremendous. Let me go through a quick calculation. With the rebate, it costs about 25K for the panels. Divide that by what Zillow says is my current price, about 3% of the cost of the house, and you can get 30 years of free electricity. Seems like it would be worth it to me. Remaining to be done. Upgrade the pool filter pump. I did that already. That's saving me a half a megawatt hour a year. You know, it's hard to find efficient dehumidifiers. It turns out cooling is costing me, cooling the whole house and dehumidifying the basement are using about the same amount of energy, somewhere around 1 or so megawatt hours a year. If we went to a more efficient dehumidifier, we'd save about half of that or 3/4 of that, but I just haven't done it yet. Unfortunately, if I went to more efficient, if I put another couple of solar panels on initially, that would have saved me more than the more efficient dehumidifier at a lower price. Cheap solar PV, it really has changed everything. So bottom lines, the equipment upgrades and the building shell, step at a time. It's easier at move in, it's low marginal cost. There are rebates that makes it really brings the cost down. The house is much more comfortable. A lot of people would do these things just to make their house more comfortable. Indoor air quality, if there were test kits to see if we had problems, I put upgraded bathroom fans. I think we're okay with the ventilation, but you do have to think about it. The outgassing of the foam might be an issue. I don't think it is. It's got sheetrock over it. When they first put the foam in, they did it wrong. They had to rip it out and do it again. So, you got to keep your eye on these things. You could use AI to look at the building and understand when things go wrong and tell you so that you can fix it before you go through a whole winter of something being broken. And that's happened over and over again on my house. I buy efficient products, but then they break and then I don't know it. And I lose a little bit of efficiency. Heat pump water heater is great. Everybody should have one. Ground source heat pump, it really is 2 or 3 times as good as an air source heat pump. The first cost is high. Hopefully they'll be able to get the cost down. I don't know. I'd have to look at the economics. PV is great. It's the easiest, most reliable upgrade if possible. Some people have shading. They don't have roofs. They live in apartments. And you can't always do it. This is where I think good progress could be made. If you do these upgrades, it's really hard to estimate the savings because the needed parameters are not readily available. But if people could create software that would help people figure out how much they're going to save and how much they have saved and how well their house is working, that would help a lot. Another problem is that things are always changing. Things are breaking. We're making changes to the house. We have changes. We have kids that are growing up who are doing things differently. The shutdown. When COVID hit, all of a sudden, we had 4 or 5 computers on all the time being used 12 hours a day. And that was a really increase in the electricity use. So it's with all these changes, it takes more effort to unravel how things are changing in the house when we make the upgrade. So it's a little trickier.
So Greg, it's about 4:30.
I'll stop. I'll answer questions.
If the students have any questions they want to ask.
Yeah, I'll just stop right. Oh, I'll spend 1 more minute. Achieving low energy, a lot of low energy houses are new construction. It's really easy and really cost effective to do it in a new construction. Nothing, but even in an existing house, it's possible, even straightforward. There's nothing really fancy here. It requires attention to details. It helps to buy a fixer-upper. I didn't mention that. Our house was trashed when we bought it. Everything needed to be fixed, so that helps. If you make the improvements when you're doing needed repairs or upgrades anyway, it's a lot easier and it's sort of fun. Okay, Harsha, time for questions. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, yeah, I think let's take, guys have any questions? It's a good time to ask Dr. Venturis, So first, anybody?
How hard is it to go in and pull away the floorboards and fill out those leaks?
So
that's a really good question. So you use tricks. I mean, generally, let me, am I still sharing or have I stopped? I think I've stopped sharing. Let me go back.
Let's see, you're not sharing the.
Yeah, I'll go back to sharing here. Share screen. Does that look good? Not yet.
Not yet. Need to share, I guess.
Share, we'll hit share. Okay, is that good now?
Yes.
Okay, let me go back. If you had to take out the floorboards, that might be hard. But typically what you do is you go up into the attic. Well, if the if the leaks, sometimes there are penetrations here, up into the walls, up in between floors, anything in the basement, if you have an unfinished basement, is accessible. Here, this space here was accessible. There's usually bypasses there. Up in the attic, I'll show you these pictures here. You know, basically, well, this one was really accessible because I could just climb up into the attic of my garage, which had a floor in it. So this was all accessible. In the attic space, if your floor is unfinished, which a lot of attics are, you can go up there and just, it's messy because you have to peel back the insulation. In my case, it was blown in fiberglass, which is horrible. You got to put a spacesuit on, a Tyvek suit with goggles and face mask, a really high quality respirator, and it's miserable. But you can hire people to do this stuff. Some people will suck out all the fiberglass and blow in foam, and that's a great solution. So you don't have to pull the floorboards out. Sometimes you might have to. If you had to, that would be awkward. And that is the challenge. One of my basement walls had drywall on it, and it had no insulation. And how do you insulate that? I had the guys blow in this stuff, and it didn't work all that well. But it's a challenge, and that's why this stuff is hard. Or I should say, that's the hard part of this, is you never know what you're going to find. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. Great question.
Questions? Yeah.
So you mentioned how terrible you thought it was to have the ductwork in the attics. Would you prefer to have that like in the ceiling space of like the area that's being cooled, or like under the floor to have better heat transfer?
Great question. Just because I say something is terrible doesn't mean I have the solution. Is your class a design class? I guess it is a design class, isn't it? So design, not really. Okay. Well, anyway, they say that that the thing to do is separate the idea generation stage from the idea selection stage. And I'm in the idea generation stage. Ductwork in the attic is bad. Now, figuring out the solution, that's a different problem. That one solution is to put high quality foam when you install the things in the first place and be sure all the air leaks are sealed. The contractors just have to spend more time, and they can't do the, shoddy jobs with very little insulation that's not very continuous. So if they install it right in the first place, it can be in the attic. It's probably better to have it in the living space or in the stud space between the raw walls or underneath the insulation or in the basement. There are lots of solutions. Depends upon where you live and how the construction works. But again, new construction is a lot better. In my case, I just sealed up all the leaks and put a lot of insulation over the ducts, and that helped.
So the new ductwork, people don't use these galvanized iron, right? They use plastic tubes, flexible tubes with a lot of insulation. They're much better than these whole galvanized duct that people use.
Not if you're a duct worker. But the flexible stuff has larger pressure drop. The flexible stuff has way larger pressure drop. So from a pumping loss, it's more of a problem. I'm not
diameter though. It's a pretty large diameter. So
true.
Question. Any other questions?
How far did you have to drill into the ground for your ground source heat pump?
They a lot of it depends upon the type of soil and a lot of the drilling conditions that you have and what the drillers expect to find. These guys are the guys that drill wells, and most of my town is on well water. I am not, but so they know a lot about drilling, and they sort of can take guesses about what they're going to find. They offered to put 3 holes of 150 feet deep each, or 2 holes of 285 feet. And they went with 285, and I'm glad they did because I think it's better. But a lot of it depends upon how big a heating system you need, what the energy load is of your house, and what the drillers feel is the right solution.
No? Any other questions?
I have to say that I know where you guys are coming from. I didn't know anything about houses until I didn't have a house until I was, I don't know, 40 some odd years old, because I resisted. Yeah. But it's only when you buy a house that you start thinking about this stuff. And then, and I understand that you guys are not in the position where you deal with this sort of stuff very much. So it's difficult to have a personal connection to all this hardware. But for better or worse, don't worry. You may in the future, but I understand that this stuff is not part of your usual stuff you encounter.
At least they're passionate about it. It's great news.
I understand. I hate to say it, but I was too. I got a fancy degree in chemical engineering from Princeton, and I got out of college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd worked with this energy center as an undergraduate doing little research projects, and they offered me a job crawling around attics, stuffing insulation, and analyzing the data. And that's what I did for a couple of years after graduating. And I didn't, it wasn't using my degree properly, and I'm not encouraging you to do that, but I believed in it. And I met a guy working at NIST as a guest researcher from Italy, and he was working on some fire research problems having to do with forest fires or something. And he actually used to work in hospital energy efficiency. And I asked him, why did you work on hospital energy efficiency? It's not very technical considering your PhD in applied math. And he said, well, I believed in it. I believed there was real potential in it, and I believed that it was something we needed to do, and that's what I wanted to work on. And I thought to myself, yeah, I understand. And don't get me wrong, I am not encouraging you to do this, but I understand if people do, even for a short time. And I don't know. I mean, I think all this stuff is solvable. There's real tremendous urgency now because it's all doable. It's all doable, and we can really make a lot of difference all at once.
The need is very clear right now. Yes, Lucas, you had a question?
I noticed that he's working in fire protection right now. So does he have anything to say about fireproofing houses like in California?
I don't have anything to say about it. I have friends who are working on it, and they know much, much more than I do about that problem. It's another important problem. I'm glad that people are working on it. To me, it's a chicken or the, I don't know what the expression is, but penny saved is a penny earned. This is a Benjamin Franklin sort of thing. If we cut down on global warming, we won't have as big a fire problem in the West. And so I like to, as an engineer, you think about what's causing the problem. Let's try to attack that first. But, with all these problems in real time, we got to tackle all of them. And we got a lot of energetic, well-educated young people who can help us.
Greg, you can probably say something about your current research on.
Oh yeah. This is really fun. Okay, so the working fluids in refrigerators are freons. These things used to be chlorinated compounds, which are the chlorine gets up into the stratosphere and gets into a catalytic sequence of reactions that destroy the ozone. So they had this international treaty, the Montreal Protocol. They got rid of, they're largely phased down the chlorofluorocarbons, and they replaced them with hydrofluorocarbons, just fluorines and hydrogens. And these things are global warmers. The chlorinated compounds were even worse global warmers, but the fluorinated compounds are still global warmers. So the refrigerants are going to be responsible for about 20% of the increase in total global warming from carbon. About 20% of that is going to be due to refrigerant gases. So they've come up with compounds which are low global warming potential refrigerants. But to do that, they have to add hydrogen atoms to the molecules. That makes them more reactive in the troposphere, so they break down. But as you make them more reactive in the troposphere, they become flammable. So now soon we're going to start having flammable refrigerants in your air conditioners and heat pumps. They're already used in Japan, and they're already used in China, and there are ways to use them safely, but this is new for American industry. And so they got to figure out ways to do it safely. So I've been studying fire safety of flammable refrigerants, basically.
That's
Okay.
Okay, I think any other questions? hopefully, Greg, we can reach out to you, right? If you students have any questions, I can reach out to you and get your opinion, expert opinion.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad to help however I can. Ken, I really believe in this stuff. I'd like to help anybody who's interested in making progress, because if we throw the pond in the water and the pond spreads out, more and more people will do it, and we'll be in better shape. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to talk.
Thanks so much, Greg. I'll get in touch with you. Yeah, take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Take care, Greg.
Okay, I should take